Hello everyone, thank you for joining this webinar. Today our guest speaker, Gill Cleeren. Hi Gill.
Hello.
He will present the advanced Silverlight 5 topic or deep dive in Silverlight 5. Hopefully it will be really interesting stuff to present as Silverlight 5 is emerging and hopefully we'll see the final release very soon. So after the webinar, we will have like 15 minutes for Q&A. You can ask questions by typing in the chat panel. So during the webinar, just ask your questions and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. So let's get started. Gill?
Okay, thanks Emil. Hello everyone, and welcome to another Silverlight Show webinar. Today I will be talking about Silverlight 5. It's actually the first talk I think I'm doing about Silverlight 5. It's been around a couple of months already, and in beta of course, and this is actually the first talk that I'm going to do about Silverlight 5. The goal of this talk, since it is titled Advanced, is I'm not going to show you the standard stuff about debugging debugging data binding extension and stuff like that. I'm going to show you quite a number of features, quite a large number of features. We're going to have quite a high speed going through them, but I really didn't pick out the easiest ones. I picked out the more advanced ones that might be of interest for you. So for the people who've never heard about me, let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Gill Cleeren. I am a .NET architect at a company called Ordina here in Belgium, where I work as mainly on Silverlight projects and WPF projects. I'm actually coming from an ASP.NET background. I'm a regional director for Microsoft and a Silverlight MVP. And I'm a regular speaker at many conferences. I've been at Tech Days, TechEd. I will be at DevReach in Bulgaria, which is the home country of Silverlight Show. And I'm doing a lot of tours for Telerik as well, around several countries. I will be going to Scotland later this year. I also have my own user group here in Belgium, which is Vizug, and we do a lot of sessions also like this, but then in real life, not online. So if you are from the neighborhood, please stop by our website and you can take a look at all that we are doing. I've written a book on Silverlight, which is called Silverlight 4 Data and Services Cookbook. And yeah, there is a new line below that. There is a new one being written as we speak. And today I actually got word of the publisher that it will be released in a pre-available format in a couple of weeks normally. So the stuff that has already been written will be available, will be made available very shortly. So you will have another book of me on your bookshelf if you like reading them. I've added my blog as well as my email address and my Twitter. I'm very often talking about things around Silverlight. So if you want to follow me, that's simply at Gill Cleeren that you have to add on Twitter. Some practical stuff, like Emil already mentioned. You can ask questions through the Q&A window. I'll be answering as many as possible at the end. If we can't answer them all, we'll try doing them by mail. And a video of this webinar, a link to the video, will be sent to you after it has been put on the Silverlight Show website. You can download the demos as well from there. There's some good news as well. You can win by simply completing the post-webinar survey. You can win one of the 3 ebooks that I've written for Silverlight Show, which is called Getting Ready for the Microsoft Silverlight Exam. So that's the exam that is bundled for Silverlight, and this guide will help you with getting ready for that exam. So that is something that you can win by completing the post-webinar survey, but you can also win by tweeting about this webinar by using the tag webinar Silverlight Show. You can win one of the Silverlight Show t-shirts, as you can see over here. I don't know who's that pale guy. Emil, is that you posing in that t-shirt? No?
Yeah,
no?
maybe.
Maybe, okay. Then you definitely need some sun in that case. Okay, so let's take a look at what I will be talking about. There are a lot of new features in Silverlight 5. There's way too many features to cover in just 1 hour. So, as mentioned, I've taken a couple of them that I found to be more advanced, and I've actually divided them in 5 blocks. 5, let's say, topics. We will be starting with the data block, in which I'll be discussing things that have been added to Silverlight in regards to data binding and data-related stuff, things that are important for building enterprise applications. Then the second block is about text, things that have been improved around text overflow, text spacing. I will be talking very shortly about media. I'm not going to show you how to do 3D because I really don't understand how to do 3D development, and I'm going to show you a small demo. I'm going to talk quite a bit about the application model. With the application model, I basically mean things that have been added or changed, let's say, in the way that Silverlight can execute. We know the outer browser mode, the trusted outer browser mode, and with Silverlight 5, there's going to be a new mode which is called in-browser trusted applications, and we're going to see at what that brings along. And then if we have time, we're going to stop at a few miscellaneous things that I'm going to discuss a bit in more detail. So today we are at Silverlight 5, which is currently in a beta stadium. If you take a look at this timeline, we're actually going very fast. There hasn't been a year that hasn't been a new Silverlight release, and every version adds to the features that was in the previous one. So as you can see here, in 2007, everything started for Silverlight with V1. V2 was released in 2008. 2009 version 3. Last year, with the release of Visual Studio 2010, we also got the release of Silverlight 4, and now at Mix, which was in March or April, we're going to have version 5. Sorry, we already have a version 5, and by the end of this year, let's hope, that's what Microsoft is saying at this point, we're going to have the RTM version, so that's the final version of Silverlight 5, which is, and that's the first time that's going to be the case, going to be released as a 32 and a 64-bit version. At this point, we don't have the 64-bit version yet. We only have the 32-bit version available at this point. There is what we also have is beta tools, which only work with Visual Studio 2010 Service Pack 1 installed. There is also an Expression Blend 5 preview, which really isn't that different from Silverlight, from Expression Blend 4, apart from the fact that it, of course, supports Silverlight 5. There's also at this point a version of WCF RIA services that is compatible with Silverlight 5 available, and that's called WCF RIA Services SP2. And one thing that we don't have, and I really think that is important to know at this point, is a Go Live license. There is no Go Live license available right now, which has some consequences. You can, of course, build applications with Silverlight 5, but in fact, it's not licensed to build real production applications with that at this point. So that means that there is no guarantee that there won't be any breaking changes when Silverlight 5 is going to be released in its final version. So you will probably have to do one or more changes here and there in your code. Might be that there is some new features or features that have been left out. All that is possible. But let's focus on what we have today. And as mentioned, I'm going to start with talking about data. More specifically, I will be talking about the added features which are the ancestor relative source binding, implicit data templates, style bindings, custom markup extensions, and there's a fifth one that I will be talking about, but I'm really not a star in PowerPoint, and if I added another fifth one in there, it all became very small, so I'm just going to say that the fifth one is the iCustom type provider, and we will be looking at that one as well. So let's dive first into the data block. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the ancestor relative source. The ancestor relative source is a new property that you can add on a binding, and it was already available in WPF. So WPF developers, Windows Presentation Foundation developers, already knew about this ancestor relative source binding, and with Silverlight 5 it has been added to the to Silverlight as well. So with version 5, it's now possible to use this type of binding as well. Now, what exactly is this ancestor relative source binding? Well, assume that you have a list box, and inside of that list box you have a data template defined for your list box item template. That's very normal to do. Now, what you cannot do within that data template is go outside of the visual tree of that data template. That has a consequence. It is in fact impossible, for example, from within that data template to bind to a property of the list box item. For example, I cannot react to the fact that the list box item is selected or not from within my data template because I simply don't know. The data template in itself is like an island, and you cannot go outside of that data template to take a look at what the data context is, for example. With the ancestor relative source, you can do exactly that. It is possible to access elements outside of the visual tree of the data template. And there's actually two ways that are possible. You can do an ancestor level. That is, if you know where the element that you are binding to related to the data template is located in the visual tree in terms of levels. You can say I want to go 2 levels upwards, for example, or you can use the ancestor type. An ancestor type, as the word says it, is basically going to refer to a first instance of a specific type that you encounter starting from within the template. Okay, if this is all not quite clear, let me show it to you in a demo. The ancestor relative source is really not that easy to understand, so let me show it to you in a demo. By the way, we are going to do the demos in a remote desktop connection. The remote desktop is very near to me. It's actually also on my desk, but because of the fact that I have found some incompatibility with the tools in my instance of Visual Studio, I don't know if it's a common thing, but in mine I had some issues if I had Silverlight 4 and 5 installed, and my machine is used daily for Silverlight 4 development, so I have my demos on a separate machine. I hope that's fine for you. You won't actually notice quite a lot of it. So this is the demo of ancestor relative source. Let me first start by running it for you. So there we have one of the most basic list boxes, as you can see here. This list box, when I select an item within it, as you can see, there is a green rectangle popping up in front of the selected item. This I have done through the ancestor relative source binding. Let me show you what I've done. So let me make a bit more room because we have quite a large font here. So this is the list box, which is called user list box, and it has an item template defined which is called listbox item template, and this template is right at the top of this XAML file, as you can see here. It's a regular data template which simply has a key. Within that data template I have a rectangle, and that rectangle I want to bind its visibility to the fact whether or not that listbox item is selected. But that is impossible using a regular binding because I am confined within the borders of the data template and I cannot go outside of it. Sure, there are ways to get around that. For example, going through the list item container style, that you have to redo that entirely, but that's a lot of work. This one is much easier. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bind the visibility of that rectangle, as you can see here, and I'm going to say what is now the object that I want to bind to. What is the source? Well, it's a relative source. The relative source says I want to bind to the ancestor type listbox item, which is basically a signal to Silverlight that it says, well, I'm going to search from within this template up in the visual tree of the XAML file for the first instance of listbox item that I'm going to find. And then it finds this particular listbox item. And I'm going to bind to its isSelected property. That's what you see here. By the way, there is a small converter defined here, which is called the local visibility converter. This converter, as you can see here, is a very simple converter that converts a Boolean, the fact whether or not the isSelected property, let's say, and then I have to convert that into a value of the system Windows visibility and narration. That's exactly what I'm doing here. Now there was a second thing on this particular page that I really want to show you as well. Because I got also a question from someone that already looked at the slides. And there's in the slides something. Let me quickly jump back to the slides here. The combo box item source needs access to the data context outside of the item template. In this case, it's a list box, but that's basically the same thing. Take a look at what I have here. This is a list box. And in the data template of the list box item, I have a combo box. Now that combo box needs to be bound to a property that is being exposed on the view model. Okay? How do I get to the data context, to the view model? Well, again, using the ancestor relative source. Let's close this one down. So I have here at the bottom the list box, which has an item template called combo box item template. I named it combo box item template because there's a combo box inside of it. And it's right up here. And take a look what's now happening. Well, there is a combo box and a text block in here. And the combo box needs to bind to a user's property. Let's take a look at that user's property first. So this is my code behind. By the way, this would be exactly the same if I had done this demo using view model. Let's assume, for the sake of this demo, to keep things simple, that the current instance of this class is the data context of this particular XAML file as well. So basically, I'm saying this particular class is now the view model. It's not right, but in terms of view model, but it's a bit easier for this demo. So I'm saying the data context of this particular instance is the instance itself, and on this class I have a property called users, and that is the property that I want to bind to from within the combo box. So what I'm doing here is I'm again using the relative source. Where are we here? I'm saying the item source for this particular combo box can be found using a relative source. Search for the instance of the user control. Search all the way up to the user control. That is the source. And on there, let me bind to data context users, and that exactly is this particular property, because the data context has been set to this instance. So as you can see, there are quite a few useful places where the relative source may help you in your work, for example, in view model scenarios as well. Let's close that one down, and let's move on to the next topic. Implicit data templates. Now, since Silverlight 4, there's something added called implicit styles. Now, an implicit style, what exactly is that? If you don't know it, it's basically a style that has no key attached to it, but only a type. And the implicit style basically says, well, this style is going to be used for all instances of that type unless they define their own style. And that's more or less the same for an implicit data template. An implicit data template is a template that is defined for a particular type, not for a particular, not with a key, but only for a particular type. So basically, that means that I can say, well, this is a data template to visualize a user instance, a person instance, a whatever instance, and whenever Silverlight needs to visualize a collection or a single instance of that particular type, it will refer to this data template to show you how the instance would look with that data template applied on it. This, of course, works mostly in combination with either an items control or a content control. I'm going to show you both in just a second in the demo. Now, using implicit data templates, it becomes possible to have within, for example, a single list box, several data templates applied. How is that? Well, assume that you have a simple inheritance tree with a shape class as the base class, and a rectangle and a circle class that inherit from that shape class. And assume that you are binding a list or an observable collection, let's say, of shapes to an items control, a list box, for example. And I have created an implicit data template for the shape, for the circle, and for the rectangle. And when I bind that list box to the observable collection of shapes, Silverlight will take a look at each instance and it will show the most specific template. So if there is a specific template for shape, for circle, it will take that one. If there is one for rectangle, it will take that one. And if there is none, it will take the default for shape. So it will apply the most specific template if you are using it in combination with an inheritance tree. And this allows you to get more than one template in the same control. By the way, this more or less reflects the way that the data template selector works in WPF. And the data template selector is not yet available in Silverlight 5. It's basically something in WPF that allows you to select between 2 or more data templates based on the value of a property. But that's not available in Silverlight 5. So let's take a look at implicit data templates. Let's go to the remote desktop, this one. Implicit data templates. By the way, don't fear, there's a lot of demos, but most demos are shorter than the first couple of ones. So don't fear that we're going to be here for 3 hours or so. Okay, there we go. Let's take a look at the demo first. So there we have it. It's an out-of-browser application for a reason that I'll show you in just a second. So what you see here could have been done with a normal template, with a normal data template. This is simply a list box in which I have linked an observable collection of person instances. And when I add a new person, it's going to add that new person to that list box as well, because I'm adding it to the observable collection that lies behind. Okay, so this is the person class, very simple class. In the main page, somewhere I'm creating this person's collection. I'm adding persons to it, and I'm setting the item source to persons. Nothing particular there. Let's take a look at the XAML. There is something weird going on. As you can see here, I have a list box, and that list box doesn't have a data template attached to it. However, it is not doing the default, using the toString on the person clause. And that is because I have defined an implicit data template for the person type. And that's what you see here. Inside of the application XAML, in the application resources, I have a data template defined, and the data type for that is that person type that I've created. And in here, it's nothing but a simple data template. And now what happens is that Silverlight notices that I'm feeding it person instances, and it will automatically jump to this particular type. It knows that it has a way of visualizing that type, and that's exactly what that implicit data template is doing. Yeah. Now, it's also useful in combination with an items control. With the content control. This was an items control. For example, I select one of the persons here, and I click on the Show Person button, and I'm using here the window class, and I'm going back to that later on. But what is most striking here is that I am binding that entire window to an instance of the person class, again using that same implicit data template. Let me show you what I'm doing. So I have the person window here. No, let me first go to the main page. Let me do that first. Let's go to the show person. If you don't understand what's going on here, don't worry, we'll come back to that later on. I'm creating a new window, and that's also the reason why I'm doing this out of browser. So there's a new window being created, and also the person is being retrieved from the person from the person list box, and I'm specifying the data context for that particular window as that person. Now, in the XAML that is making up, that's set as the content of that window, I use a content presenter which is linked to the binding. And remember, the binding is set here as a person. And because of this simple reason, I simply throw a person at it, and it knows, again, it will automatically have to use that particular implicit data template to visualize how a person looks in this case. So these are a couple of interesting uses of the implicit data templates. Okay, let's move on to the next one. That's a short one, style bindings. With Silverlight 5, it becomes possible to do data bindings within a style, actually within the value of a style setter. This way, it is very easy to do theming, not templating, theming. What I mean is the following. Well, assume that we have an object that contains style information, things like colors, for example. We create an instance of that object, and we bind a style to that object. If the object implements the iNotify property changed and its values change, all the views that are bound to that style will then be updated. That's what you see in this particular graph here. So I have the theme object, let's call it the theme object. And I have a style that is linked using data binding to that object. I have several views linked to that particular style. If the object changes one or more of its values, the style will also be updated and all the views will automatically reflect the new style information. This allows me to create, I see this more for things like theming. That's what I see this being interesting for. Let me show you what I mean using a theme. Let's go to the third one, and that's style bindings. All right. So let me run the demo first, that you understand what we are looking at. And so this is, there we go. So this is a button that will actually apply a theme, let's say, on this particular page. As you can see now, it's a white theme, now it's a red theme, and now it's a white theme again. So of course I can do more colors, but this is now done just for the sake of simplicity. So I've created like a dynamic sort of style. How did I do that? Well, using style binding. Let me show you what I mean. I have an object which is called color setter, and this is like my theme object. That's the one that keeps track of where we are, what should be the new colors. This color setter implements the iNotify property changed interface, and that's important if I want to make things update. Again, it's data binding, so that's needed for that case, of course. I have two properties. I have two fields, in fact, two private fields, solid color brush, and I have created two public properties around brush 1 and brush 2. I have also the property changed event that's being implemented here, and I have the private boolean which is called red, which actually keeps track of the current state of the theme. Okay. Now, I've also got a method here which is called change colors, which is going to change the brushes. Okay, that's about it for the theme object. In my app XAML, I have instantiated this particular class in an object called local color setter. And then I am binding styles. I'm actually binding value properties to that particular object. As you can see here, the source has been set to that particular object, and I'm binding to the public properties brush 1 and brush 2. The XAML itself doesn't have anything in particular. It's simply binding to those styles. But when I click that button, I am going to fetch that particular instance from the resources. That's what you see here. And I'm going to call the change colors, which was actually going to change the values of the colors. And so if you take a look at this, small drawing here, so this is what happens. I'm changing the object by clicking the button. That raises, using the iNotify property change interface, an event that the value of this property has changed. That changes the style, and all the views that are linked to it are automatically being updated. And that's what you see happening in this particular code. And so I have as many views as I have, they will all be updated to reflect the new values. And this way I can create like dynamic themes more or less in my Silverlight apps. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, and that is custom markup extensions. Now, first, a very small slide on markup extensions. I hope you all know what a markup extension is. It's basically the thing that is being surrounded using curly braces. In Silverlight, we have a few. We have the binding, we have the static resource. Basically, a markup extension, what does that do? So when your XAML is being parsed by the XAML parser, it creates objects. It sees a button, it creates a button. A markup extension is, as the word says it, something that extends the markup, and it's basically a signal for the XAML parser that it cannot handle it by itself, and it will because an object has to be created that is linked to an object in the regular object graph. So when it encounters a binding markup extension, it knows that a binding object has to be instantiated that will be linked to the original object that is using that binding object. That's what a markup extension does. So basically, it allows the creation of objects in memory. And now in Silverlight 5, we have the custom markup extensions that are being added for us. And they practically do the same thing. They allow us to write classes that can be, let's say, instantiated next to the normal object graph of the XAML that is being created. This already existed in WPF, but has now also been introduced in Silverlight 5. Why the hell would I use this? Is there use for this? Well, this is actually a very useful thing. For example, what you cannot do is using static class instantiation from in Silverlight. In WPF, you can do that using custom markup extensions, and in Silverlight 5, we can now also do that. So basically, it allows the calling of a class instance from XAML code. So actually, we can run our own code. For example, we can write something instead of a converter, that the value is going to be shown and it's going to be, let's say, changed in some way. What we normally would do with the converter, we can wrap that in a custom markup extension. The XAML is going to be a bit cleaner. Another use I see for it is translations. Translations being done automatically for us. Okay. Let me show you custom markup extensions. Let's jump back to the demos, and that's this one. Custom markup extension. I have quite a few markup extensions. I'm going to take a look at them. They're actually quite simple. Let me run the demo first. That took me quite a lot to design, as you can see here. Can't see it yet. There we go. So this is 5 or 6 markup extensions being shown or being used on the same page. Let's take a look. So the first one is called simple extension, and it says, "You, sir, are great. You created a custom markup extension." Okay. Did I simply do that with a text block? No, I didn't. I used a markup extension to say that I'm great. I needed a markup extension for that. I couldn't do it myself. So anyway, let's take a look at the simple extension. Well, any markup extension, any custom markup extension, inherits from markup extension. And so that's not different here. So it's a simple extension that extends the markup extension. And it's going to be used somewhere in XAML, and it's going to return a value. And so my class, my markup extension, needs to override the provide value method. And in this case, I'm simply returning a string. So this is logic that is going to run whenever I use this markup extension. Now, how do I use that markup extension? Well, that's a good question. Let's take a look. As you can see here, this text block doesn't have that particular text in there. It's simply getting its text, let's say, from a binding, more or less, but it's simply using a custom markup extension. That is this one, local simple extension. Of course, we can use properties. As you can see here, this person extension has a first name, last name, and age. So this person extension is this one. It's the first name, last name, and age, which are simply public properties on the markup extension class. There we go. And I'm returning the formatted string, as you can see here. That's showing Gill Cleeren is 32 years old. Or should perhaps say young, but anyway. You can also write this without the curly braces, should you feel the need for this, and this is how you can do that. I don't find this really readable, but anyway, I always use the curly braces for markup extensions. Anyway, a very practical use is the following. The translation extension. Now, assume that you have an application that has to be translated in a lot of languages, and you don't want to use resources. What can you do then? Well, for example, assume that all the translations, perhaps of legacy reasons, are placed in a database. And so you need those translations on the client. So what can you do? Well, you can write a service that downloads those translations for you. Perhaps on the very first load, it downloads a list of all Dutch translations, because the user is using the application in Dutch. And so I need to bind my text dynamically to one of those downloaded values. And for that, I can use a markup extension as well. Let's take a look. So this is the local translator, which has a key property called home title. And my translator extension, again a markup extension, is going to return from a translator service. I wouldn't advise calling a service directly from here, but perhaps it's a cached store, a cached repository of translations on the client, and that's how I would do this. And I'm calling to get a translation in with that given key. And again, I don't have to write anything special for this. Using my custom markup extension, it's very clean to do this directly inside of my XAML. And the last thing I'm going to show you is the binding validation extension, as you can see here. Now, the binding validation extension doesn't inherit from markup extension, it inherits from binding. Now, the good news is that binding inherits from binding base, and binding base inherits from markup extension. So we're actually okay. Now, what is this binding validation extension? Assume that you have inside of your application a lot of bindings that should have some defaults. For example, the mode is always two-way, the validates or notify data errors should always be true, and the notify data validation error should always be true. If that is the case, you can wrap this inside of a custom markup extension, let's say a custom binding object, and I am calling that, as you can see here, directly from my XAML. And another final thing that I want to show you is another practical use in terms of view model scenarios. We have a very basic main view model here. Nothing special going on here. It exposes a few properties. Assume that I want a view first approach, so that I have my view that instantiates the view model, for example, through a factory. This view here needs to bind to an instance of a particular class. It knows what type it is, but I cannot instantiate it directly. Now, using a custom markup extension that I've called view model extension, that's this one, it's gonna get in a string, this one, and using reflection in here, I am going to instantiate that particular type. I'm going to return that instance of that type, and that is going to be set as the data context for this particular user control. So in view model scenarios, I can use this markup extension, for example, to instantiate my view models directly from the view. Okay? So let's move on, because I think we're a bit behind. The next and the last thing that I want to talk about in data segment is binding to dynamic properties using the iCustom type provider. You may not know this, but Silverlight 4 or previous versions need at compile time to know what the properties are that we are going to be using in a data binding scenario. That is the case. That you cannot go around it. You may not have encountered this as an issue. It's not a real issue. But there are situations where it would be handy that only at runtime we know what are the properties that we're going to bind to. And that is possible in Silverlight 5 using the iCustom type provider interface. Basically, what this thing enables you to do is binding to an object of which the structure is only known at runtime. You may think, where do I actually encounter that? Assume that you are binding to a service that returns different fields for a different type that is different every time that you ask it. In that particular case, you could use this iCustom type provider to create the type on the fly and use the binding only at runtime. And that's the iCustom type provider interface that enables this behavior. Now, the interface itself is really simple. It only has one simple method, which is called getCustomType. Now, the data binding engine itself has changed. If you are binding, it will take a look if your object implements this interface. If it does, Silverlight knows that we are binding in fact to, let's say, a dynamic object. If it doesn't, we are actually using the simple or the same way of data binding that we've always used. So basically what this thing does, it allows you to bind to objects, let's say to types of which you don't know how they're going to look until runtime. Dynamic types, let's say. Okay, so these are a couple of steps that you have to do. you can use a helper class, and I've added this link here, which is where this helper class is actually coming from, and it makes life easier working with this interface. And I'm going to use it in my demo as well. So let's go back to the demo, and let's go to iCustomTypeProvider demo. Okay, it's loading. So let me first run the application. It's, again, a very basic application, but it shows you what we have to do. It's going to show me a list of movies. As you can see, it has a few properties: title, duration, description, is playing, and director. Nothing particular, you might say. Well, that's true unless the movie type at compile time only has title, duration, and description. So it has less properties than it has here in the UI, because I added new properties dynamically at runtime. To do so, I had to implement the iCustomTypeProvider. Now, for that, I've used this helper class, which you can download from the resource that I've added on the slides. This myCustomTypeHelper implements the iCustomTypeProvider for me. It, of course, implements the getCustomType, which will return a new type for you. And also what it does, it adds properties, it adds methods like the add property somewhere in here that allows me to add new properties to the type at runtime. Again, let's now take a look at how this is working. So my movie class, it inherits from the myCustomTypeHelper in movie. The main page simply has a data grid, nothing special going on here, and it is bound to a collection of movie instances. Somewhere, movies here, there we have it. Now before we're actually binding, I'm adding two properties using the add property that is in the helper class. It is adding the is playing of type bool and the director of type string. And now I'm creating a new movie instance, as you can see here. It doesn't include, this is impossible of course, it doesn't include the is playing and director. That wouldn't work. So I have to specify the values through the set property value method for the is playing and the true. And that I'm doing several times. And so Silverlight doesn't know to what it's going to bind at compile time. So because of the fact that my class implements this interface, it doesn't care. It will allow the type to change at runtime, and the data binding will still work in this particular case. And this happens if you are binding to services that return different fields. Sometimes perhaps they add new fields when new features come available on the server, for example. This is actually very handy in that particular case. Okay, so what I haven't shown you, because this was covered in the previous webinar, for example, already, is data binding debugging. And what I've also not shown you is a data context changed event, and that is actually not because I didn't want to, but it is not available in the beta at this point. All right, the next block is text, and there's only two very small ones that I want to talk about here. That's character spacing and text overflow. Now, character spacing is it's really not hard to figure out what this thing is doing, I think. Character spacing allows you to, well, change the spaces between, or the spacing between characters. This is added on the control class, meaning that it becomes available for things like a text block, but also for things like a text element and all its inheriting children, like paragraph, the run, the span, things that you use in combination with the rich text box. It is expressed as 1,000th of a font size, which basically means that if you set the character spacing to 1,000, it more or less, I don't think that's really true, but it more or less comes down to having one space between two characters. That's what it comes down to, more or less. Let's take a look at this in a demo. Very small demo. I really can't show you a lot of this. Come on, virtual PC, don't hang. This is not good. There we go. Character spacing. For some reason, there is a lag in my remote connection. There we go. You try this 1,000 times and it always works, and when you do it live, it seems to be hicking up. Anyway, we're still working. We're waiting. Visual Studio, there we go. Okay, let's run this before it actually dies on me. This is not going very well at this point. Let's try it again. I'm going to close the remote connection for a second and try opening it again. Okay, let's do that again. Let's connect to it. This is taking way too long. Anyway, we're going to continue with the text already, and we'll see what it does. Text overflow is another new feature that is being added in Silverlight 5. I think this was covered already in the previous webinar, and I got a message somewhere. It cannot connect. That is not good. Let's continue first with the text overflow. So as mentioned, I think it was covered already in the previous webinar. Basically, it allows us to do overflow within a rich text box. Normally, a rich text box, when it is, let's say, full, it will display me some scroll bars vertically. Now, with the text overflow that has been added to the rich text box, it is possible to chain several rich text boxes to one another. And so that means that when the first one is full, without showing scroll bars, the text will continue in the next one, and this allows us to create a really rich layout. Let's say a magazine-looking layout. What I mean by that is you can, for example, go around elements. For example, an image, you can go around that using several rich text box overflow elements. And if you start selecting things, it's possible to span a selection on more than one element. So you can drag the text and it will make a selection over more than one element. Okay. Let's hope that the remote desktop connection is now working again. There we go. Seems to be doing something now. Now we have a black screen. Is it a black screen of that or not? Okay, I think we're back in business. You've been so many. Please keep your fingers crossed that I'm not the victim of some demo god. There we go. So we should see the character spacing now. Sorry for the interruption there. It is still not going okay. There we go. So this is the character spacing. As you can see, the first text, it's a text box, has the character spacing set to 1,000. The next one has it set to 200, and the last one has set it to 100. So as you see, it always seems to be like more or less one space that sits in between the characters. And of course, this last sentence here, that's also in the text box, I can expand it with this slider, and as you can see, we can go really crazy with the text expansion here with the character spacing. There's not really that much to see here. Let's continue to the next demo that I want to show you, which is a text box overflow. Text box overflow demo. Please continue. Text box overflow demo. It's again quite slow. There we go. I think I know what it's doing. It's probably installing some Windows updates, and that's what's making it slower than normal. So this is the rich text box overflow. And let's first show what it looks like. So this is now possible using a rich text box and its overflow companions. It is possible to make a rich text box and add some rich text box overflow blocks here that are simply going around this centerpiece thing here. That could be an image or is like an inset that you have in a magazine. And look what happens when I'm dragging. It is actually making the selection over all the available rich text blocks and their overflow. How is this developed? Well, it is done using the rich text box itself. And the rich text box, come on, there we go. The rich text box has an overflow content target specified. And that is using a binding to another element. That is called overflow 1. And overflow 1 is of type rich text box overflow, which we should be scrolling through in just a second. That's rich text box overflow, called overflow 1, and that is bound to overflow 2. So that's what I'm doing, what I meant when I'm saying I'm chaining them. I'm simply creating a list of several rich text box overflow instances. Note that these rich text box overflows don't have any text inside of them. It is only the rich text box that has all the text specified inside of it. And so when it is full, based on its normal size settings, it will push the content to the next overflow item. All right, let's go to the next one, and I'm going to start the demo already so that we don't lose any time here. There are a few things being added in the text space. There's improved open type support, so there's improved support for that. And there's also even clearer text. There's going to be something called pixel snapping, but again, those features will only be available in the RTM version. Let us take a look at media. What has been added in terms of media? The most important one, I think, is 3D support. I'm not a 3D developer. I really don't know how to do those things. It is based on XNA, that I know, but I really can't show you how to do that. That is very specific stuff. But I wanted to talk to you about why this is very interesting for us as Silverlight developers. For one thing, it was a very highly requested feature, but still, not only because it's a highly requested feature, it's made available. It is today something that most devices are capable of. Most devices today are capable of displaying 3D content. And it is great for enterprise. One might think 3D, well, that's typically for games. Well, yes, it is typical for games, but it is also typical for enterprise stuff. Business. In business, you need to do some design, some virtual tours on an application. Manufacturing, showing objects in a 3D space. Data visualizations. Geographic things, science projects that may need 3D support. In education, I actually did a project where we had video being recorded and being shown in a three-dimensional space, but that was done in WPF because simply there was no support for 3D in Silverlight. So education, training, also very interesting that there is now 3D support available. Also medical things. Perhaps you saw the demo that Scott Guthrie gave at Mix, where they showed his bones and his skeleton. So that is medical applications will also benefit for this. I had a demo available, but it was basically the same demo as in the previous webinar, so you can take a look at it there. I'm not going to show it here to save some time. What I'm going to show you is something called Trick Play. Now, Trick Play is something that is useful when watching SilverlightShow webinars. Now, today you cannot speed me up. It's quite hard for me to talk any faster than I'm doing now. But using Trick Play, when watching video with Silverlight, it is possible to adapt the playback rate on the media element to make the video or the audio go faster or go slower if that would be necessary for you. We're having this in the beta already, but in the beta it is not fully implemented in a sense that if you speed it up, it is not gonna go. It's not gonna. If you speed up video, I should say, it's not gonna produce any sound anymore because it would create high pitches. It is gonna be changed in the RTM version of Silverlight 5 that will keep the same pitch, so that you don't have a high squeaking voice, but it will keep the same pitch for the voice all audio effect. Let me show you this. This is a demo that I know that doesn't really work too well on a remote desktop connection. Let me show you the code in any case. So we have the media element, and the media element has been bound to, the playback rate has been bound to a slider. That's what you see here at the bottom. There's a playback rate being shown. And so when I play the video, and again, this might not come through very good. I've tested it. It doesn't really show the video all too well. But when we increase the playback rate, it's going to go a bit faster. So we have some video here. Yeah, seems to be stopping already. So yeah, now it's playing at 1 speed. So now it's going at 3 speed. So there we have the birds going very fast. I hope you can see this, but it's now going at a speed 3 speed, so 3 times the normal pace. Okay, that's the birds. Let's leave the birds alone, and let's go to the next topic. Let's go to the slides already. Let's go to this one. The thing that I wanted to talk about in quite some detail still is application model. With Silverlight 4, we got trusted applications, out-of-browser applications, that allowed to run Silverlight applications with elevated permissions. In Silverlight 3, we already had out-of-browser applications, but they still run inside of the sandbox. Now in Silverlight 5, there is a new application model being added, which is called trusted in-browser applications. They allow us to run applications inside of the browser with the same elevated permissions as we had in Silverlight 4 with out-of-browser applications with elevated permissions. So the same thing, but now in browser. Now, if you remember, perhaps you've built some of those, when installing a Silverlight 4 trusted out-of-browser application, the user had to consent. There has to be a click to say, yes, I want to install this, and I know this has elevated permissions. In Silverlight 5, this in-browser thing, of course, you ask the user if the user wants to do this or not. So what happens is this is being set using group policy in most cases. So there's normally not anything else that you as an end user have to do. This is being allowed using from the admin using a group policy. And it's also possible to say which sources are trusted for the applications so that you can add your own domain, for example, that your intranet applications in-browser Silverlight applications with elevated permissions are trusted. If you take a look at the 3 modes that we have now, so we have the sandboxed application, trusted applications in Silverlight 4 and in Silverlight 5. Prompt free, so I mean that there is no prompt being shown, for example, if you do a copy. Is not available in sandboxed applications, is available in Silverlight 4 and 5. Cross-domain, network, full screen, full keyboard access, and COM. This is basically the same thing. They are not available in Silverlight 3 or Silverlight 4 sandboxed applications. They are available in trusted Silverlight 4 applications and also, of course, in Silverlight 5. And now there are some new things being added, and that's unrestricted file access. That is, of course, not available in sandboxed applications, is more or less available in Silverlight 4 applications, and is fully available in Silverlight 5. That means that Silverlight can access all files on the hard disk. It's also possible to do pinvoke, and it's also possible to do run in browser. The 2 last things are Silverlight 5 only features, as you can see here. How do you create a trusted in-browser application? Well, it couldn't be simpler. It's exactly the same as using a Silverlight 4 trusted application. You can use Visual Studio for this, and this results in the out-of-browser settings being added another attribute, which is elevated permissions, and that is set to required. And you have to sign this app. You can do that from Visual Studio, or you can do that using a command line tool. So let's take a look. If my remote desktop is still working. So I have a trusted application here. It is a trusted application inside of the browser. Now how do I set this? As I mentioned, the Silverlight application itself in the properties. Come on. Oh, no, it was my fault. It was already open. So in the, I have to set the enable. I have to enable the out-of-browser settings and require the elevated permissions. And then if I run the application from the website, well, it will run as an in-browser application with elevated permissions. It says so. Of course, you don't have to believe me, but let's take a look at the code. In the code behind, it is. I'm saying this particular, executing this particular code. If the application has elevated permissions, I'm saying I'm an elevated application. Yeah. So this is how it works. It's basically nothing different to make it work. If you want to run this on your machine, you have to add a registry key, which I'm going to show you. Inside of your HQ local machine software, if you're running on a 64-bit version of Windows, you have to add this WOW6432 node, Microsoft Silverlight, and there you have to add another D word, which is called allow elevated trust apps in browser, and set it to, whoops, not this one, set it to 1. In this case, your machine is set to allow the execution of this type of applications in browser. If this word has not been set, it doesn't work. So I'm not really sure how this will keep on working in the full RTM version, but this is how it works now in the beta. Another consequence of this is that we have in-browser Silverlight applications that need to go full screen. If you remember, in-browser regular Silverlight applications couldn't access all the keys on the keyboard. This was a limit to build kiosk applications, things that you see in the mall, for example. You couldn't do that in Silverlight in-browser apps because you couldn't type. In most cases, you needed to type. You didn't have access to the keyboard. Silverlight 5 adds this support. And let me show you, because it's quite simple to show. I'm running, again, an in-browser trusted application. You see it is in-browser. I have a simple text box here. And I can type. Of course, it's running in browser, but not full screen. Let's go to full screen, and I can still type. And perhaps you noted there is no pop-up being shown to say that you have to hit the escape button to go out of it. That is also typical for in-browser trusted applications. So I can do whatever I want here inside of my full screen application. All right. It seems the remote desktop has recovered somehow. Another thing that is possible is something weird, but it might be useful. Browser in browser. We already had the web browser control in Silverlight 4 that allowed us to run, well, a web browser control inside of a Silverlight application, but it was only possible in out-of-browser applications. Because of the fact that we have in-browser trusted applications, we can now run a web browser inside of the web browser. You may ask, why the hell is this useful? Well, it could be useful, for example, for integrating an existing ASP.NET, or let's say HTML website, into a Silverlight application. If you have more integration needed, this could be very useful. I'm going to show it very quickly. There's not really a lot to see, of course. So we have a web browser control that is pointing to an extremely well written blog, written by yours truly, by the way. As you can see here, it is now loading my website. There we have it. So it is actually showing a browser inside of the browser. I wonder if I can build a Silverlight application inside of that still shows another browser, but I need to test that to go deeper and deeper, to make browser in browser in browser. But anyway, let's not do that now. And let me show you another thing that has been added to Silverlight 5. Not this one. Unrestricted file access. Silverlight for trusted applications could access the file system, but only limited parts of it. In fact, they could only access the My Documents, the My Music, the My Pictures, and the My Videos. Silverlight 5 trusted applications, both in and out of browser. Trusted applications can access the entire machine. Let me show you. I'm going to show you a demo in which I am going to loop through my Windows directory. Of course, I need to check if the application has elevated permissions. And I'm going to loop through all the directories inside of my Windows directory. This is, of course, not possible with Silverlight 4, but with Silverlight 5, it is showing me all the available directories inside of my machine, on my Windows directory, not on the hard disk in this case. All right. So you can see that Silverlight 5 applications have a lot more things that is possible for them. And it's going to be extended even further. When Silverlight is going to RTM, Silverlight 5, that is, it's going to be possible to do p-invoke. Now, you already had in Silverlight 4 the ability to call components. That was a new feature in Silverlight 4. Well, that is now going to be extended to also support p-invoke calls. Now, a p-invoke call is basically, it's more or less the same than calling a COM component, but COM is more for office automation and stuff like that. p-invoke is more for Win32 and C++. And it works in the exact same fashion as regular.NET applications do it. As you can see there at the bottom, there's a single line of code that calls into a native Win32 DLL. As mentioned in the beginning, there's going to be a 64-bit version available of Silverlight 5. So we have 32-bit and 64-bit available on RTM of Silverlight. This is important for applications that use a lot of address space. And also, if you use a 64-bit browser, it's going to be very interesting that you have a 64-bit version of the Silverlight plugin as well. The Pivo viewer, you may already know this control. This is of course not new, but it is possible. It will be possible to use this control straight out of the box with Silverlight 5. It is going to be integrated with Silverlight 5. It's going to become an integral part of the platform. It's not going to be a separate download anymore. And let's finish off by taking a very quick look at some miscellaneous things that are available in Silverlight 5. I have 3 and I very quickly want to show you. The first one is a very interesting one for me. I've struggled with this. I've used custom controls for this, but it's now possible to do combo box type ahead in Silverlight natively. What I mean by that, it is possible to select an item within a combo box by hitting a key, and it will automatically scroll to the first instance that contains that key, or starts with that key. Let me show you how very interesting this thing is. Combo box type ahead. That is this one. Let me run it for you. There's nothing particular in the code, by the way. It simply works. So we have here a combo box that has some text in there, AABB. And let me type a K. As you see, it's going automatically to the first one that has a K. Typing an O, typing an A, it's automatically jumping to the first one. So that is really handy to have in there out of the box. Close this one down. There we go. The next feature, I think this was discussed in the previous webinar. I'm not really sure, but anyway, multiple windows. In Silverlight 4, regarding both in out of browser and in browser, it depended a bit, you had several types of separate windows, let's say, available. We had the child window, which is basically a control that pops up over the other window. It's still inside of the XAML. You had the pop-up, which was also inside of the XAML. And then we had the notification window. It was possible to use in out-of-browser applications in Silverlight 4. The toast was basically the thing that Outlook showed you at the bottom of your screen. Now it is possible with Silverlight 5 to launch native windows, native window windows, a real window, using the window class. It is possible to launch as many as you want. When you, of course, close the Silverlight application, it will close all the launched windows also. This only works in Silverlight 5 trusted out-of-browser applications. This doesn't work with the in-browser applications. Let me show you a couple of uses of this thing. We already saw one in the beginning when we were looking at the implicit data template. But this is another demo. Let me show you the demo first. So this is my trusted Silverlight 5 out-of-browser application. I'm going to open a window, and as you can see here, it has launched a new window. I can launch as many as I want, always, of course, in this particular case, with this little beetle thing on it. If I close this one down, it will close all the launched windows. How did we do that? Well, we clicked on the regular button and we asked to create a new instance of the window class with width and a height and a title. And of course you have to specify what is going to be inside of that window. That is in this case a pop-up window which contains some XAML, that contains the beetle girl, quite a lot of XAML in fact, and then I set the visibility to visible, and this launches the window. If you want to do it a bit more exotic, you can take a look at the second window that I have here, and it's more or less like a Windows XP window. So you can see here, it's a blue window, and I can of course drag it, and basically what I did, I made this window chromeless. And then I have to of course implement the things that when I resize this window to make it also possible to see that to see the cursor changes and stuff, and also of course make it possible to drag around the window. Let me show you how I did that very quickly. So we have the chromeless window launches a new window. It calls the create window. Let's take a look at this one. This actually creates an instance of the window Chrome XAML, which is the window itself, which I had to draw myself. So the blue things that you saw were all different rectangles. And then in code, in the window Chrome class, I have to wire up all the drag events. And that's what you see here. The actual window, the chromeless window, I have to append, I have to register for things like drag resize that makes it possible to drag the thing and resize it. I'll add the code in the demo. You can take a look at it later on. It's a bit too much code since we're a bit over time to look at in more detail. And the final thing I want to show you is support for multiple click counts. This was missing in Silverlight, and it's a pity that it had to take that it was only added now, because we had to find solutions for this. How could we do a double click, perhaps a triple click inside of an application? What you did normally, well, you launch a separate thread or use the timer to check if the user clicked more than once inside of a specific time frame. Now Silverlight 5 brings to the table unlimited click counts. You can do triple clicks, or you can do 10 clicks if you want to inside of every application. Let me show you how this is done. I didn't open it yet. There we go. Okay, let's run this thing. So I have here an ellipse, and I click on it, and it says I've clicked once. You can see it. Click two times. It's now registered 2 times, but it says it knows that it's a double click. I can try doing a triple click and a 7 click and a 12 click, and it's still registering this thing as, in this case, a 40 double click. So this is, I'm going to stop here, but it is possible to make your users click 40 times before they actually do something. I think that is not really good in terms of user experience, but if you want to annoy your users, that might be interesting. But that said, it is really useful to make a double click natively available inside of the platform. Now, how is this actually done? Let's take a look. I'm doing simply a mouse left button down. That's still the same. And in here, in the mouse button, come on, scroll, there we go. The mouse button event arcs, I now have the click count available. And the click count knows how many times I've clicked. So based on this, we can figure out if it is a single click, a double click, or a triple click, or whatever that you want to capture. All right. So with that, let me go back to the slides. There are some other new features that sadly we cannot show yet because they are not in the beta. There is support for WS Trust services. That's an important one. And there is also support for vector-based PostScript printing, so PostScript vector printing, I should say. This is another important one. I don't know if you've tried printing with Silverlight, and it works great if you have 1, 2, 3 pages, but if you have to print, for example, a report of 60 or 100 pages, the size of the image that is being generated, because it is based on the writable bitmap, is huge. And this will be brought down dramatically because we now get vector-based PostScript printing in Silverlight 5. And also WS Trust is really an important one that is going to come because it's allowing us to do other types of communication with services. So I think we can really conclude that Silverlight 5 is rich of new features, and it's many great new features available that again make the platform more typical for the enterprise environment. Strong new data binding support, media editions, perhaps not on first sight really useful for enterprise, but as I talked about the 3D support, it is useful in an enterprise environment as well. Also, the addition of the in-browser application support with elevated permissions make it possible to make the deployment for applications within an enterprise even easier. So the application model is also another great new feature. And as mentioned, there are some features that we couldn't show today because they aren't in the beta, but they will be in the final version of Silverlight 5. So with that, I hope I've really given you an overview of some of the cool new features, the more advanced new features of Silverlight 5. I haven't stopped at the basic things, and we saw quite some complicated things as well. Please take a look at the demos afterwards. And if you have any questions, you can send them by mail. And we're also going to take a look at the questions that have been asked through the Q&A window now. So let's take a look at some questions now. Emil, I suppose there are some questions?
Yeah, there are some. You should be able to read them.
Yeah, I'm going to open it here and let me quickly see. There is, no, this one. Questions. Let's take a look. Making this a bit bigger. There is a question, expression blend 5. I don't know what the question is. There's simply a question mark behind expression blend 5. Yeah, so I think the person is asking, is there already an expression blend 5? Well, there is in preview, but I've not shown that. Basically, as far as I've worked with it, it's basically doing the same thing as expression blend 4, but now for Silverlight 5. I really don't know if there's any really big new features in there. As mentioned, I really haven't played with it yet. But I think it's basically evolving and supporting Silverlight 5. Bob Baker asks, how are we going to be able to get that registry key deployed for users? Well, that is a good question. As I mentioned with the trusted in-browser applications, at this point, we have to say this is our beta, and I really don't know how this is going to be in the full version. But in the beta, you are required to have that registry key set. That is not possible, I think, to use in combination with public applications. This is more aimed at a corporation where the administrator can apply a group policy, and the group policy can then include that registry setting. So as far as I know, the users will have to set that registry key, let's say, themselves, but not really themselves. But it's not going to be possible to do that from the Silverlight application, of course. If you want to use that in a real application, perhaps you need to use some batch file that the user has to run to make it possible to to add that registry key. So at this point, I would say it's aimed at the enterprise. It's not really aimed at using public applications. Let me, because the thing is scrolling here. Next question from again from Pierre Huguet or something is he's asking, are there any limitations across platforms? Are all those features available on Silverlight 5 for the Mac? Well, of course some aren't. Thing like pinvoke is of course not possible inside or available on the Mac. I'm not really sure about the in-browser model on a Mac. I've never used a Mac, so I really can't test it. But I would suspect that the in-browser might be another issue, let's say, because of the fact that it is at this point based on a registry setting. But things like pinvoke and com support is also not available on Silverlight. So on the Mac, so I think that is going to be as a Windows-only feature as well. But pinvoke, for example, is Windows only. The next question, let me take this one. Would it be possible to show a window as a model dialog? Well, at this point, it isn't possible. I've tried it. It is not possible to show a window as a model dialog. I don't know if it is going to be changed, but I really don't think it is going to be possible. But at this point, it is in any case not possible. The next question is, would Silverlight in browser work on Safari browsers as well? No. It's at this point it's an IE only feature. And the next question from Katie Johnston is, can you say anything about non-Windows devices? I think so. She asks, is there anything new on the iPad, the iPhone for Silverlight? Well, at this point, I think there is nothing known, and as far as I know, there is nothing going to be done there at this point. So Silverlight 5 beta, in any case, there's not going to be. It's not possible to run Silverlight 5 beta applications on the iPad. Let me go to the next question. There's a question from Laurie asking, can the new window instances communicate? Well, yes, they can, because if you take a look at the code, yeah, I'm not going to open the code anymore. It is indeed possible to do that. The classes are instantiated, and they can, using an event model, communicate with each other. I think even using a data binding scenario might make it possible to link these things. So there's another question on printing. For page handling events, is that being changed? Well, in fact, I cannot answer that because at this point that is not in the beta yet, so I really don't know if that is going to be changed or not. Then Richard asks if pinvoke is going to be available in browser. I'm 99% sure that it is going to be in browser as well, because it's basically trusted applications in browser run with the same permissions as out of browser as Silverlight 5. So all the things that are possible regarding pinvoke should be possible in browser as well. I'm 99% sure that that is the case. But again, this is something that we cannot test yet because it is not in the current beta version. There's a few more questions. Is there any improvements in memory usage and cleanup? There have been changes quite a lot in GDR releases of Silverlight 4 regarding a known memory leak. There are numerous fixes made in Silverlight 5 as well that are not being elaborated on. So I really can't say if a particular tree view issue is going to be resolved or not in Silverlight 5. But if this is really a memory leak and it is known by Microsoft, then it is probably going to be fixed. I would suggest so. If you have really found a memory leak, I suggest you get in contact with Microsoft via Connect. So connect with Microsoft.com, and you mention that you have really found something, because that is really important that Microsoft knows about these things. There's another question. Is there going to be any encoders? I really don't. I've never seen an encoder in Silverlight 5 beta at this point. There is something called the low latency sound. That is something that's coming from XNA, if I'm not mistaken. That is made available in Silverlight 5, but I haven't played with that yet. So that is available in the new version. Is there any size increase? I don't know. I really don't know. Silverlight installed itself on my machine with the automatic installer, and I really don't know if there was an increase in the runtime. I think there's going to be a small increase, but again, it's all still quite small. There's one last question. Will Silverlight 5 allow me to create an access to an SSL on NetTCP? Well, I have to say that I really don't know if that is going to be possible. in Silverlight 5. No, I really don't know if that's going to be possible. And the two other questions, I need some extra explanations, so we're going to take them via mail because I really don't understand these two. So I think we're through with the questions, unless you have any others. It's now the time to ask them.
Okay, perfect. I think we answered a lot of questions. There are some that will be replied personally via email in the next couple of days. Recording of this webinar, as well as all the demos and slides and everything will be made available to you and emailed within the next 2 days. So thank you, Drew. I think it was a wonderful webinar. A lot of useful information, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so please help us improve SilverlightShow webinars by filling in our short survey displayed right after you exit the GoToWebinar software. And thanks for attending, and have a good day or night or whatever time is it in your country.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.